That's Jimmy Stein. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Jimmy, it is Georgia week officially. Earlier, I think around 6:30 this morning, I tweeted out that we're 132 hours away from kickoff. And after a long off week, bye week for both teams, which I think in some ways helped both teams. Alabama was able to get a little bit more healthy. Tennessee game for Georgia, a lot of emotions running high, off of that game, being able to reset and, set your sights on Alabama. So I think it was beneficial for both. But it is officially Georgia week. First of all, how you feeling, brother?
Pretty good considering Alabama's an underdog. That's when you think about it, going all the way back to 2009 in particular, I've been a whole lot of those. I don't know what the official count is, but it would be low considering you're not an underdog much at Alabama, but you're an underdog here. I'm a little surprised that the line is only 3.5. I thought it would be a little more, and I think maybe it should be a little more based on Alabama's season last year, based on what happened in Tallahassee, based on the fact it's in Athens. But one of my themes this week, Clint, as I've had several days to think through this game, is mirror image. And by that, I mean, I see a lot of Alabama in Georgia. I see a lot of Georgia and Alabama. I think that comes from Alabama still having a lot of Nick Saban DNA. And obviously they do over in Georgia as well through Kirby Smart. But a lot of the ways or a lot of the terms I would use to describe Georgia and their current program, I would use those same terms to describe Alabama. I mean, in terms of the talent, in terms of the offense, in terms of the defense, in terms of the prestige of the program and ranked and where both teams are in the current college football landscape, and how, sure, Alabama's not where they were during the height of the Saban dynasty. I would argue Georgia's not where they were in 2021 and 2022. They've descended a bit from when they were at the absolute perch of the sport. So I just see a lot of similarities. And I know today we're going to talk Alabama offense versus Georgia defense. But one of those similarities I see, Clint, myself, is I see a ton of similarities between Gunnar Stockton and Ty Simpson. To me, they're very similar. If I was like, hey, tell me about Gunnar Stockton's game, I think you would think I'm describing Ty Simpson and vice versa.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I have felt the same way, and just their toughness, their willingness to stand there in the pocket and take a hit and deliver good footballs, their mobility. There are obviously some things that Gunnar Stockton does well. I think the experience factor in those big games, which we've talked about, that kind of favors Gunnar Stockton. But Ty Simpson, just the growth that we've seen from him, and the real test will obviously be Saturday. I understand that Georgia's defense has struggled as far as especially against Tennessee and stopping the passing game and some stuff with the run game. But, being in Athens in a hostile environment and that team being energized and Kirby Smart's ability to make life difficult on opposing quarterbacks typically, it's going to be a lot for Ty Simpson. And so there's just some natural advantages built in for Gunnar Stockton that you just can't control. I mean, home field advantage and 3.5, I agree with you. That is a very, if this was a neutral site game, what Vegas is essentially telling you is it would essentially be a pick 'em because it's typically about 3 points for the home team. And so they view these teams similarly, or at least they feel like a lot of the betting people are going to be, it's going to be pretty even money on both sides. And part of that could be just Alabama's history against Georgia and the recent success and the way that they came out last year. Before we get into it, one thing I do want to talk about, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it, it just does feel like that this Alabama coaching staff, they build up to these games. Like you're kind of simplistic against Florida State, probably because you thought you had an advantage going in. They were very wrong on that, and they paid dearly for it. I'm just telling you how it looks because you look on tape offensively. I mean, in some ways, I just don't feel like that they threw a whole lot at Florida State's defense. Then as the season progresses, you start seeing more being added. Now, that could be guys getting more comfortable, or it could be, okay, we're wanting to put some more stuff on tape that we want Georgia to prepare for. And then they come out and it's like they bring everything together. And the stuff they put on tape, there was a reason behind it. The things that they didn't put on tape, There was a reason behind it. And that's why I think that this coaching staff has done such a good job in these big games. Now, what they're learning is this isn't the Pac-12. So if you're not going to take Florida State or some of these opponents seriously, they're good enough to make you pay for it. And so you might get something at a leg up or an advantage in the big games, but you're sacrificing something in these smaller games. And I think that is something this coaching staff, as much as they want to, to continue to take that approach, I think it is something that they will have to change, and they will change. But also, at least for this game, maybe that will end up playing to an advantage for Alabama.
I think when you hired Kalen DeBoer, he was so proven in the big games. He was so proven in those games because Alabama hires him off of playing in the national title game. So he won a huge semifinal game to get to the finals. He won a huge, game against Oregon in the regular season. They beat all the good teams they had to beat to get into the national championship picture. And the year before, he inherited a bad team and won 10 games, winning several games against what at Washington would be big time competition. I think DeBoer feels weirdly proven against big names. I think he's like some crazy stat, like maybe where he's undefeated against Kirby, Sark, and Lanning, which is nuts because he's got a losing record, for instance, against Clark Lee and Sharon Moore, for instance. So I like. Here's one thing I don't think is going to happen, Clint. That first week, not making an excuse because there's no excuse for it. Not making an excuse, but it feels like in that first week, Alabama showed up expecting to get 2-10 Florida State, and that's not what they got. They got 10-2 Florida State, not 2-10 Florida State. And I think it put them on their heels. And you've talked about this a lot, and I've stolen a lot of those talking points, by the way. You've
Totally
talked about
fine.
this a lot, about how, using different words to make your point. Under DeBoer, when Alabama has been pushed into the ditch, they have not fought their way out. They stayed in the ditch. They didn't get out. Kane Womack, in a recent visit to Mobile, speaking to the Mobile First and 10 Club or something, he said unprompted, without being asked, we haven't done a good job of responding when we get punched in the mouth. I think that's what has to be answered by Alabama, because it's going to happen in the Georgia game. They're going to push you in the ditch. It's going to happen. And it might even happen early. But if you don't learn to drive out of the ditch, get back in the race and beat them to the finish line, if you don't learn how to do that, you could have a really long season, because this schedule is absurd. This is our fourth undefeated team in a row Alabama's played. The fourth one. Fourth time in a row Alabama's played a team that hasn't lost yet. Guess what? You're probably playing a team next week that won't have any losses. And you might be playing a team the week after that won't have any losses. That's the nature of this insane schedule. You're going to be punched in the mouth. Until they learn how to respond, it's a scary thought.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the big question. Like we're going to break this down, and we're going to look at it from all kinds of different angles, and I think it's going to be great conversation. But there's elements of this that we just simply don't know yet, because they haven't shown it yet. To assume, hey, if Georgia punches them in the mouth, they're going to bounce back now. They learned their lesson against Florida State. Well, I would have said that about 3 or 4 times last year, and they never learned their lesson. So what I will say is that if we're going to take those trends, how much they've struggled on the road, a lot of these different things, you got to look at the big games, and you got to look at the fact that they played extremely well. And, you think about against Tennessee, Alabama's defense, they did come out and play a really good football game. They put the offense in positions to be successful in a very hostile environment. Now, granted, defense doesn't have to deal with crowd like the offense does, which is why that will be a big talking point for today's conversation between Alabama's offense against Georgia's defense. But, look at LSU. Defense played extremely well against Garrett Nussmeier and a good LSU offense. So it's, defense has kind of done its thing. Right now, it's figuring out the offense. And for a guy like Ryan Grubb, and just the brain trust that he creates with Kalen DeBoer and, of course, Nick Sheridan and others, what have they cooked up for this type of game? Because I think going in, Tennessee, they did run the football pretty well against Georgia at times, not C gap to C gap. Like a lot of there between the tackles, really outside of the tackles and in, not a whole lot of success at all. 2, 3, 3.5 yards per carry for their running backs. But it was the counter stuff that got to the perimeter. It was a lot of the design perimeter stuff. That's where they did have some success. And so that's something to look at if you're Alabama, because right now they're between the, C gap to C gap. They're not running the football very well at all. Getting Jam Miller back, hopefully you can do that a little bit more. The fact that Kevin Riley brings some of that element, the fact that you're naturally going to have some of that with Ty Simpson's legs. Like, I do think Alabama will try to take advantage of that, but it wasn't like a lot of people. I mean, I saw people talking about it saying that Tennessee had their way with Georgia's run defense and they ran all over them. I didn't see that. I saw some timely big runs. I saw, some times where maybe they got the 3 or 4 yards per pop that they wanted, but it was anything but consistent. And I would say overall, Georgia's run defense was a lot more effective than their secondary and their pass defense. So that's something that some people will say, well, that plays in Alabama's hand because they're not running the football well anyways, and they've kind of learned to rely on that already. But I do think you got to have some semblance or some sort of presence as far as being able to run the football against Georgia.
Yeah, I think there'll be some Jam Miller runs. I mean, we want to see Jam under fire, right? And I think there'll be some Jam Miller runs, but I sort of like the short passing game and that screen game as an extension of the run game this weekend. But, when you have a 2-week buildup, one of the things that happens that's irrelevant to the game, by the way, but one of the things that happens is my mind changes a couple of times. And last week, in the first week, I was thinking, Alabama's going to have a long season unless they establish a better running game. And maybe with Jam coming back, maybe with Jaden Roberts playing more snaps, maybe with Big Mike Carroll playing more snaps, maybe we start seeing the evolution of the Alabama run game in 2025. But now that I've had more time to digest this game, the more I've thought, you can't go into this game forcing something that just isn't there. Between Alabama's inability to run the ball so far and Georgia's outstanding ability, like you said, especially between the tackles, to stop the run. I think for Alabama to have success in this game offensively, you've got to do what you do best. And what does Alabama do best? I would say through 3 games, what I'm impressed with is the short and intermediate pass game. I think that's where Alabama does their best work, and they're very difficult to defend because not only do you have the high-end talents like Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard, but you have so many targets. There's a bigger target in Zay Horton. There's an exciting slot in Lazier Brooks. There's backs who are pretty good catching the ball. Jam Miller and Kevin Riley, they're very good catching the ball. You even have tight ends like Josh Cuevas, who's a threat as a pass catcher. So I think Alabama's deep roster of pass catchers running routes in the short and intermediate is what Alabama does best. And I think you see them do that to death against Georgia, just simply because, hey, here's our best pitch. I mean, it's the playoff type atmosphere. It's a playoff type game. You better not get beat with your second or third best pitch. You come in with, hey, if your best pitch is the fastball, then you show up with the fastball. And so last week I was saying, whoever runs the ball best is going to win this game. I've changed my mind. I think it's whoever does what they do best wins the game. To me, it's Alabama in the short and intermediate pass game. Ironically, I think that's maybe what Georgia does best too. But but I do think that's what we're going to see a lot of, Clint, is Ty throwing as many as 40 times in this game, maybe 45. But it's not going to be necessarily airing it out all over Sanford Stadium. I think it's going to be a lot of swing passes, screen passes, intermediate crossing routes, and not too many deep shots, though you have to do that every once in a while to back them up.
Yeah, Ty Simpson, a lot of his success, obviously you're going to have the quick passing game and the stuff that goes, screens and things like that are behind the line of scrimmage. But then also when you start getting beyond that type of stuff, the short to intermediate parts of the field, he's been really effective over the middle. And then when you start going further out, the 20+ yard passes, a lot of that have been to the perimeter. And so I think that, with this Georgia defense, where I think they're most vulnerable is, at least right now, they're not playing great football on the perimeter at corner. And that really goes for pretty much everybody. But, how Alabama takes advantage of that, I think it's Ryan Williams and doing a lot of that stuff where if you have him lined up in the slot, have him doing stuff that works him outside, get him outside the numbers where he makes a lot of his plays. I understand there's going to be plenty of stuff that's working over the middle. That's a staple of this offense, and the fact that they're going to make you cover every inch of it. I think Georgia and the athleticism that they have at off-ball linebacker, I think that makes it a little bit more difficult. At safety, they're really aggressive, triggering downhill. I think you can take advantage of that, maybe get them on some double moves, which is something that Georgia did against Alabama in the second half last year. Use their aggressiveness against them. But, it is, when you talk about the run game and Alabama's inability to do that, we've already talked about it last week as far as all the different elements that's going into it and what's causing it. Jam Miller maybe can help, because I think you can be more diverse with a guy who's played a lot of football and can handle a larger workload as far as like the different types of things that you're asking him to do. I mean, you look back to the Georgia game last year, very ineffective Jam Miller on the ground, did not have hardly any success. But as far as making an impact, as far as being a pass catcher, that was an element that he brought to the table. And so I think this year you will need probably a little bit more from him on the ground. You don't have Jalen Milroe's legs to fall back on like you did last year. And when it comes to the passing game, especially in the first half, Milroe brought that element. He was attacking the intermediate parts of the field with great success. And towards the end, I think things started trailing off. And obviously you had the prayer to Ryan Williams where Ryan Williams made a great play. I don't think, yes, Jalen Milroe was certainly a part of that, but I think that was more Ryan Williams just, especially after the catch. But I think Alabama, you've got to go into this game thinking, how do we make life as easy for Ty Simpson as possible to get him going? I think it is so critical for him to get going early. And I think Georgia's goal, and I think it's going to be their goal for the entire game, is how difficult can we make Ty Simpson's process? Because if we can stop the run and put everything on his shoulders, I don't think they're going to commit more to stopping the run. Because I look back and Wisconsin didn't. Wisconsin gave Alabama's passing game a lot more respect than people think. So Alabama's not running the football great right now. How do we ensure that continues? And then how do we make Ty Simpson's job as difficult as possible on a snap-in, snap-out basis, whether that be presenting different pictures, whether that be the way that we apply pressure, a lot of different things that you can do. But Alabama, to counter that, they've got to do some things to get him going early, because if he can get in the rhythm that he did against Louisiana Monroe and Wisconsin, obviously not to that extent, but he can, start having some success and battling that crowd and getting some early wins. I think he's going to be the type of player who's going to, the better he's going to get, the more that confidence builds in this type of environment where he can be that gamer that can go out and win you a football game, which I think to an extent, I think Alabama's defense can help out as far as what they do against Georgia's offense. But I think more so it has to be Ty Simpson on the offensive side of the football. He's got to have a good day for Alabama to, be within striking distance of winning the game.
He was just under too much duress in Tallahassee. I think against Monroe, of course, and Wisconsin, they were able to give him some time, in the pocket, and Ty was better. They've just got to find a way to protect Ty better than they did in Tallahassee. Now, Georgia doesn't, to me, have the freak pass rushers they've had in the past. We could, go, Nolan Smith, and there's a whole list of them. Jalen Carter. They've had a list of front seven guys who are just extremely difficult to block. They're going to be hard to block again. It's Georgia. They haven't stopped recruiting 5-star and 4-star talent. They're still good, but I don't know that they have game-wrecking freaks like they've had in the past, almost like you would say about Alabama, to be honest, in the front seven. So I think an improved pass protection performance from the tackles, Proctor, Formby, and Michael Carroll, who we'll see quite a bit of at right tackle, And boy, is he going to have his hands full. Well, he's going to have some welcome to the SEC moments. That's why you haven't completely turned right tackle over to Michael Carroll yet. He's going to have some welcome to the SEC moments on the road in Athens. And that's why, for me, I think you'll still see a majority of the game. But those tackles have to give Ty time, and the interior of the line just can't give up that big push. If Ty is, when we saw what happened to Auburn, Oklahoma, you can't have a 10-sack game and win the game, no matter how bad the officials were in Norman, and they were bad. You can't give up 10 sacks and win a game. Not in Athens, not anywhere. And Ty, when he has the ability, I think Ty presses too. Now, I think it's common for a guy who hasn't played too much, but when things got sort of chaotic, he pressed. And it's understandable. That's what every young quarterback response to that would be. But now he's got that under his belt. Now he's got that Florida State tape under his belt. Now it's got the, hey, if you had to do that again, what would you do different? And I feel like Alabama's just better situated here. Again, you went into Tallahassee not expecting to see a potential, heavyweight champ of the world. You're expecting to see, a tomato can. And against Georgia, they know what to expect. They know this is a challenge. They know they have to play their absolute best to win the game. And I do think you'll see a better 60-minute effort. You won't see tape when this game is over of Alabama players jogging around the field.
Well, I think the more that you can have success on first down, that is something that I think Tennessee did a really good job of, and they kept everything open on second down. And I think that that's pretty key. Like if you're consistently getting 4, 5, 6 yards on first down and making it very second manageable, that's where I think it's going to play in Alabama's favor. They have so many weapons at wide receiver, and that is one of the key matchups, in my opinion, for Alabama, is that Georgia, the struggles that they've had defending the pass, surely the strain, all of the different strain that you can put on opposing defenses in general with, Ryan Williams, if he continues to play like he did against Wisconsin, Jeremy Bernard being Mr. Consistent, Mr. Reliable, Lysier Brooks, and the fact that he really came on strong over the last couple of weeks, and he provides another option who can create yardage after the catch and uncover underneath. And the fact that a guy like Chris Brazzell for Tennessee, he had a heck of a day against Georgia from a body type perspective, and the fact that they're better route runners than you would think for guys with their size and length, that's kind of Isaiah Horton-esque. So that's something that it's like, okay, I'm not going to say this is going to be the Isaiah Horton breakout game, but just, Georgia's got some talent at corner and really in their defensive backfield, but it's just not playing up to where you're getting the production from that group that you need to. They've got to have at least one or two guys who are taking so much attention away from everybody else, and then the guys where they're trying to give attention to help out their deficiencies right now on defense. Alabama has to see the other players step up and make plays. If they're giving a lot of attention to Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams, Lysier Brooks, you got to go off. Isaiah Horton, you've got to go off. Josh Cuevas, you've got to go off. Running backs out of the backfield, you've got to have a day, because you've got to make sure that whatever it's taking with the defense gives you, quote unquote, Alabama has the ability where it's like you still like the matchups that they have available, especially in the passing game, even when Georgia is taking away certain elements. That's where Alabama can thrive. They just got to be able to do it, in the offensive line has to be able to hold up and make sure that Ty Simpson has the time to be able to allow his guys to take advantage.
Man, one point you made there. So Georgia going into this game, you've got to know the first time they had a full defensive staff meeting that Schumann runs. I'm sure Kirby's over his shoulder, but the first time they had a defensive staff meeting, you've got to know the sentence was said: we're not going to let number 2 beat us again. We're not going to let 2 beat us again. I think Georgia looks at Ryan almost like a boogeyman type thing. And they're like, that's when they look back last year, they go, Milroe got us again, but gosh, 2 was so good. We're not going to let 2 beat us. So just like Clint said, they're going to double Ryan coming off the bus. There'll be like 2 Georgia defenders watching him get off the bus, watching him with his little Beats by Dre Alabama headset, and they're going to watch him all the way in. And through warm-ups. Yeah, Ryan's getting doubled off the bus. That means mandatory big days for the other available receivers on the field. Germ, you should have one-on-one. Zay, Brooks, Rico, the tight ends, the backs. Ryan's going to garner more attention than normal. We talked about how against, Wisconsin, or against Florida State, when Jeremy Bernard had a really good game against Florida State, Ryan, on the first play of the game where Jeremy caught a ball, Ryan had 3 Florida State DBs run with them. 3 opened up. Is obviously a bust on their part. They shouldn't have 3, only 2. Jerm was wide open. That was his first catch of the year. He's going to be seeing those type opportunities against Georgia. One other point is I agree with you that Georgia's DBs, there are yards to be had against those guys. Tennessee showed us that. There's yards to be had. And, Malachi Starks is gone. I think KJ Bolden's probably their best safety. Good player, not quite Malachi Starks yet. I think he might become that over time. But KJ Bolden's not Malachi Starks yet. Don't really have, in my estimation, first-round corners, though Dalen Everett, Ellis Robinson, these were highly recruited guys, but they're not yet. So there's yards to be had. But the reason that I think there's yards to be had, I don't think it's so much DB deficiency as it is a lack of pass rush or a lack of a good enough pass rush. And I think that's why Tennessee is able to hit some of those balls downfield. Whenever you're completing balls well downfield, don't look at the DBs like, how could you get beat like that? When their ball's well downfield, you got to start looking at the pass rush. The quarterback shouldn't have time to deliver a ball 30 and 40 yards downfield. That takes a hot minute for the quarterback to get set up, set his feet, wait for the guy to break open, throw the ball. That's a slow developing play. So I do think between Georgia's lack of pass rush that they had compared to when they were really good and the DBs not being ready in a Malachi Starks level type way, there's yards to be had. I would put an over-under on Ty's passing yardage in this game, not predicting win or loss, just period. I'm very comfortable predicting Ty goes over, I'm going to say 320 in this game.
I try to avoid that type of performance, but at the same time, it almost feels like unless Tennessee is running, which I would expect, a lot of split safety looks, they're taking guys out of the box because Alabama's inability to run the football. Unless Alabama can really start to take advantage of that and make them pay for it, try to get them to bring, numbers. It's I think a huge chunk of Alabama's offensive success is going to have to come from Ty Simpson's arm. And I think that's just where, and the good part about it, if you're Alabama, is that's kind of been how you've won anyways through the first 3 games. So Georgia will try to probably do some things to try to make, they don't want Alabama living comfortably what they've kind of gotten used to doing. But at the same time, there's like a Nick Saban, Kirby Smart element where it's like, let's take away the run game and let's start there. You're going to be one-dimensional against us, and then we can start to kind of flesh things out as far as how we're going to attack the passing game based off of that. But how Georgia wins defensively, especially with their pass rush, they have 4 sacks just like Alabama. All 4 of them have come from off-ball linebackers, all 4. So they have not had a single sack from a defensive lineman or an edge rusher. Alabama has 4 sacks, but it's Yanze Pierre, London Simmons, Quay Russaw, and LT Overton, all front players. So, and when you look at Georgia, a lot of 4-2-5 stuff. What people don't understand is, you can kind of tell what is the base defense for a team, how they play in those 4-man fronts. Like Georgia, you are going to see, them do some different things, getting some 1 and 3 tech stuff on the interior. But even in those, what I would call 4-man fronts where they're walking a guy up on the edge on the line of scrimmage, they're still running a 0 and either 4 eyes, 4s, or 5s somewhere on the tackle. Alabama, when they're in their quote unquote 4-man fronts, most of the time they're going to be in a 3 tech and a 1 tech with their tackles. The 3-1 tells you that they're more of an aggressive, penetrative style versus the more of the 2-gapping style when they're still in what I would call like they have 4 guys on the line of scrimmage, but they're really in kind of an odd type of front in their alignment. That's something that when, I was watching against Tennessee and stuff, you're going to see a lot of gap control. They're going to try to play very disciplined football, but hopefully the diversity in everything that Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer can throw at you offensively, hopefully that kind of catches Georgia off guard and really forces their defensive front to start thinking, because right now they're having trouble generating a pass rush anyways. So I think that, like you said, I think that's hurting on the back end as well. It struggles on the back end, but it's also struggles generating a consistent pass rush, which is why I say if you're in a 2nd and 5 or a 2nd and 4 or whatever, and it's like, okay, we can do some things and run the football to try to make it a very manageable 3rd down, a 3rd and 1, a 3rd and 2 or whatever, you can, the passing game, Georgia can't pin their ears back and just get after you. You know, like it's just going to leave the whole playbook open and make it a lot more available to Ty Simpson. The more you're able to do that, the better off I think Alabama's going to be.
Grubb has to have a great day calling plays. I think the script, which is, some people call a script. To me, it's just really a game plan. Although there can be legitimately a script of plays, but really it's a 60-minute game plan. He's going to have to get on a roll in terms of making the calls. And Georgia's so good defensively. I think what you have to do, it's a lot like a pitcher who's got a great out pitch. All right. You can't show him the out pitch. When you got a great hitter up there, you can't show him the out pitch 6 times. What you have to do is throw the out pitch when it's time to get him out. Everything else, you're just setting up the out pitch. I think Ryan Grubb getting on a roll isn't every play call working. Boy, everything they're doing, Georgia can't stop it. They don't know what's coming. I think that's sort of a pipe dream against a high quality SEC defense on the road. But what you can do is set up your out pitch. And by that, get ready to watch, or I think what you'll see a lot of is maybe there's some inside the tackle runs that aren't good and aren't productive. And as a fan will feel like a wasted down. Maybe there's some deep balls that are thrown that are overthrown or aren't really completed or they're out of bounds. But it's all to set up the out pitch. It's all to make them defend the middle of the field, defend the deep parts of the field, make them do that, show them that, but you're doing it to open up where you really want to hurt them, which is, to me, the short cross, the screen, the throw to the back, the wheel route, anything over the middle, short and intermediate. That's where Alabama's a Viking. That's where Alabama's going to hurt them. But you just can't come out and do that time after time after time again. They'll adjust so easily. You're going to have to show them the run, the inside run. You're going to have to show them deep balls outside the numbers or even deep posts, even if they're overthrown. Don't underthrow them, Ty. Don't underthrow that, Ty. Overthrow that if you're going to miss. Overthrow it. Point being, that to me is where Grubb can be on fire as a play caller, setting up the out pitch, setting up. It's the, okay, if I'm going to get him on the inside fastball, I'm going to show him 2 breaking balls that are outside and off the plate. And I'm going to get him leaning a little bit. And then I'm going to pop him inside with my fastball and get him out. That's what a play caller should do against a team that's full of great defenders that you're not going to just sit there and beat up on for 60 minutes. You set up the big play.
I mean, at this point, how will both – obviously, Alabama, they benefited from the fact that against Florida State, they put some really bad things on tape that they knew that they were going to have to address. Now, since then, at least Kane Womack, after the Louisiana Monroe game, everybody's kind of singing the defense's praises as far as the energy and stuff, but he understood we put some things on tape that we're going to pay for later if we don't get them corrected. So it wasn't like, oh, the last 2 weeks they've had nothing to build off of or nothing that they could really address. Hopefully that they're working to get those things fixed. And if you can't get them fixed, how are you trying to mask them as much as possible? And then B, when you look at Georgia, they started off the season, not playing tough opponents. But against Tennessee, you had a lot get exposed that really, if Alabama could have played them the following week or played them before that happened, then they could have taken full advantage of that. But now they're fully, and they might have already been aware, and they've been trying to fix it. Sometimes that happens. But right now, they're fully aware of any deficiencies that they have defensively, and they're going to try to do some things to counter or mask that. And it's going to be how Alabama's coaching staff tries to stay ahead. It's not just, okay, we see this on tape, this is how we're going to try to attack this. It's, okay, if I was them and I saw that we were struggling here on tape, what would I do to try to mask that and then be ready for it? This is where the mind games come into play, and playing chess while hopefully the other coaching staff's playing checkers, the whole 9 yards. But Georgia, one thing that you can take to the bank, Alabama has really struggled when they are put in those obvious passing situations because, or at least, their offensive line has really struggled. Ty's bailed them out in some situations. They have really good receivers. But when Alabama, in this particular game, when you're put in those obvious passing situations, can Georgia do what they need to do to take advantage, to pin their ears back and really apply pressure, on a Caden Proctor or whatever? That's like, you talk about strengths versus strengths, weaknesses versus weaknesses. You're seeing some of that in this game. And it's like, okay, if you told me that they would be able to apply pressure on Ty Simpson, despite the fact they haven't really been able to apply pressure on anybody, that doesn't bode well for Alabama. If you told me going into this game, okay, Alabama, despite their deficiencies as far as the pass blocking is concerned, Ty Simpson's going to have ample time to throw the football in those obvious passing situations, or at least enough time to make plays, I would say that does not bode well for Georgia. So it's like, that's going to be something to keep an eye on if you are a fan, is who's able to mask their deficiencies enough and who's able to get creative enough to give themselves an advantage and exploit the other team's, I guess, weakness, I guess you would say.
Yeah, and I think one thing that kind of plays into Alabama's advantage here with Georgia's personnel is just my opinion after watching Georgia play, looking over the stat sheet, watching the highlights. But again, I watched the Tennessee game, of course. I think their best player on defense is probably C.J. Allen. That's who I'd vote for. Like, who's their best player right now is, and he's an off-ball linebacker. He's really, really good. You're only going to let that guy control or dominate the game if you're run heavy, right? I mean, that's what he does best. CJ Allen against the run, he's sideline to sideline. He'll penetrate, he'll blitz, but he can be dominant out there. He really is. He's one of the better off-ball linebackers in college football, and you can't let him dictate to you. And how do you dictate to him? Well, you really emphasize the pass game, and obviously there's the running backs got to pick him up on blitzes because he's dangerous there. But I think you can negate the fact that their best defender is sort of a run defender by throwing the ball a lot. It's kind of like later on this year, you play South Carolina. Their best player is Dylan Stewart, who's a pass rusher. He ought to, even though that game's about 3, 4, 5 games ahead, you can start getting the heebie-jeebies right now about getting Dylan Stewart blocked. That's going to be a problem. But you know how you negate that? You run the football. You run the football. If you're just running the football, Dylan Stewart's not as nearly impactful as he is if you plan to sit in the pocket 35 times. He's going to get you a few times if you're just going to sit back there in the pocket. That's how you negate Dylan Stewart. You do things to not allow him to dominate the game. And I think with C.J. Allen, that's a challenge for Alabama. How are we going to stay away from this kid having 16 tackles, 4 tackles for loss and a sack? How are we going to stay away from that? And that is through game planning and putting C.J. in situations where maybe he's not the best at this or the best at that. But when you run the ball between the tackles, that kid's going to get you, and he'll get you pretty consistently.
Well, one thing that Kirby Smart's always been good at, and I heard something recently where like Peyton Manning and Eli Manning are talking about halftime adjustments and how they're like they're what do you call it? They're fake, or they don't. I mean, like he's like, we go in and we eat some orange slices and then we get back out there. I think when you are one of those two guys, I think there's truth to that. I think defensively, there are some things that you can change up and switch up, whether you're going too high, one high, how you're defending certain things. And Kirby Smart's always been pretty good at that. Last year, I felt like, Alabama, when you look at what they did, they continue to kind of do what they did in the first half against their offense, where you were getting stops on third down. And if the game would have been close, they would have been punting the football a lot. Unfortunately, the game was not close, so they were trying to climb their way back into it, and so they were getting 4 downs every time. And that, just from a mentality standpoint, that's a different approach. And, it really allowed the momentum to start to shift back in Georgia's favor. And we all saw how it played out. But as far as Kirby's going to make some adjustments defensively, I think the key is, regardless of what the score is, now, if it's close or they're down, they're going to be trying to make some adjustments offensively, I'm sure. But when it comes to, even if you end up having a 14-point lead, maybe you come out with a great game plan and it's like last year, obviously not to that extent. That is such a 1 in a million type of way that worked out, where you can't say, oh, maybe they're up 28 at halftime. That's not going to happen. But if you have a sizable lead where the pressure is now on your opponent, I think last year, because it was such a commanding lead, they didn't worry about any sort of adjustments whatsoever. Like, hey, let's not put anything on tape where they're going to have time to look at, okay, what did they do to adjust to what we were trying to do offensively or defensively? And then if you have to play them again in the SEC championship, now they kind of, I don't think Alabama had to counter much last year. This year, regardless of what it looks like at halftime, Alabama's got to make sure that they're remaining aggressive and finishing the way you start. And I hope Alabama starts off fast. If they don't, I think they're in pretty big trouble. But even if they do start off fast, there can be no complacency. I don't care if you are somehow up 49 points at half. It's got to be going into the second half with this same aggressive mentality, because that is one of the things that killed them last year, in my opinion.
I think the starting fast thing is huge. One thing I want to quickly say about the halftime adjustment thing, I'm glad somebody out there that's a lot smarter than I am is making fun of the halftime adjustment stuff. One thing about halftime adjustments, does anybody think that there's a coach that's on the sidelines that's watching the other team do something and they're like, I know exactly how to stop. I know how to stop. I know what we should do. I can't wait until the half's over so I can go explain to the head coach how we can stop this. Adjustments are ongoing during a game. They don't
Correct.
wait. They don't
Correct.
wait until halftime to spring it on the team. This is what we're going to do. The adjustments happen. That's why they have the iPads on the sideline. They don't have the iPads in the locker room. They're on the sideline, so they can make the adjustments series to series. So halftime adjustments are just so overblown.
Jimmy, one of the prime examples of that is when Alabama played Georgia in the SEC championship, I believe. Yeah, that was the first when Jalen Milroe was the quarterback, and they ended up beating Georgia in the SEC championship to make it to the college football playoff over Georgia. Nick Saban talked about early in that football game, they were playing single high looks, and Georgia was still running the football effectively. And so at a certain point, they're like, we can't stop the run anyways. Why are we playing single? Let's go some split safety stuff. For whatever reason, the players were more comfortable playing in those split safety looks, and they actually started stopping the run better when they went split safety. But that is not something that Nick Saban's like, I can't wait till we get to halftime where we can start. It's like, no, this isn't working. And that was early in the game. I think it was the first couple of drives. They're like, this stuff ain't working. Let's just go ahead and throw everything that we thought we were going to have to do out the window. And, that adjustment on the fly is actually, in my opinion, what helped Alabama win that football game. So this speaks exactly to what you're talking about.
Yes, adjustments have to be in game and ongoing between series. There's not some magical thing that happens at halftime. Sure, the coaches can get together and confab, and you got a better conversation with the guys that have been in the booth. That all happens, and you can motivate the team. And I'm not saying halftime. I'm just saying that the idea that adjustments are made only during halftime is pretty absurd. But back to the good start. If it's going to sound scary, but if I was scripting this game, like, Jimmy, the game can go exactly as you draw it up. How would you draw it up to best benefit Alabama? I know all of you right now are listening to this going, oh, you win 56-0. Well, that would be great. But back to reality, it's not going to happen. This is what I think would serve Alabama best. Get behind. Get behind. I know what you can do when you're out in front as front runners. They're very good. They've been good for a year and a half when they get off to a good start. They got off to a great start against Georgia last year, won the game. Got off to a great start against LSU, won the game. Got off to a good start against Wisconsin, won the game. When they get offensively especially, when they have a rough start and they get behind and they get punched in the mouth, they have not come back. So, in my opinion, the script for fixing this Alabama team is exactly that. The script is get behind. I would like to see them get behind 21-7 early, come back and win the football game, because that's what would serve them well the rest of this year. Because guess what? If you beat Georgia, I hate to break this to everybody, you beat Georgia, you're going to get behind in other games. The schedule's just too tough. You're going to fall behind on the road, at home, LSU, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Missouri, even Vanderbilt. You're going to get behind. You've got to show the ability to withstand the S storm, as Saban used to put it, withstand that, take a few punches, and get back in it. So if I was scripting it, that's what I would do. But the formula, as Clint pointed out earlier, the formula for Alabama to win is get off to a good start. If Alabama gets off to a good start, this game gets a lead, looks really good offensively early, that's been the formula for Alabama to be successful lately, including last year. So I'm not saying I don't want to see that, because that's been the formula. But you got to show the ability to play with the lead and the ability to come from behind, because both things are going to happen over the course of an SEC football season.
Well, I mean, I think it almost felt like Alabama expected Florida State to lay down after that opening drive. Like,
Yeah.
hey, everybody thought we were going to crush y'all. We came out here and we immediately, you made us earn it, but we were able to kind of do what we needed to do as far as milking a lot of clock, taking control of the game, putting touchdowns on the board at the end of the drive. And they just expected Florida State to lay down as a 2-10 football team who definitely would have laid down in 2024. There's no doubt about it. And they didn't. They countered. They with a touchdown drive of their own. They hit Alabama in the mouth. And then from that point forward, Alabama on that ensuing drive actually was able to get down the field again. I think once that missed field goal happened, and then Florida State got the football, and then Florida State started applying the pressure, now that the game was tied, everything shifted. If Alabama could have got, and I want to say that there was a penalty, a hold, or a false start, something put them, after they had crossed the 50-yard line, something put them in an obvious passing situation. And then I want to say Ty Simpson got sacked, which kind of killed the entire drive. Now you're relying on a long field goal from Connor Talty. Hostile environment. He misses. We're in trouble. And they did not respond well to the and so you've got to be able to do that in this type of game if you want to have a chance. Is there's going to be, even if you come out there and you hit them in the mouth, great opening drive, well scripted, execution was to perfection. You got to go out there and do it defensively. Hey, let's offense just gave us a touchdown. Let's start this game fast defensively, and let's get our offense the football back again. And then if they can go down there and add more points, a field goal or a touchdown, now it's double-digit lead, and let's start rolling. Let's start building off of this. I'm not saying that's how it's going to work out. I'm saying that if Alabama's offense comes out and they get the ball first and they score a touchdown, you've got to take advantage of that. And not just – what I'm hoping is they thought Florida State was going to do that, because that's who Florida State is. One thing that we know they won't expect is Georgia's going to lay down because we have early success. Because they had a lot of success early last year. Georgia didn't lay down. Last time they were on a field against Tennessee, Tennessee had a lot of success offensively, got a multiple score lead. Did Georgia lay down on the road in a hostile environment? No, they did not. So I'm hoping that Alabama will say, we got to keep playing football. That's one drive. Who cares? Let's go get another one. So maybe that mentality shift will kind of help.
No, I agree. The scoreboard, it's easy to say. It's another thing to get them to realize, but the scoreboard has to be 0-0 in their minds for all 60 minutes. It's nothing. It's 0-0. Play the next play. One thing you got to give Georgia credit, again, it's what Georgia has right now that Alabama doesn't have right now, is the game's not over. No matter what you do against Georgia, no matter what the score is, the game is not over. You can sort of say that with Alabama lately, that the game gets over if they have a lot of success and Alabama gets behind. That's what's got to change. It's not easy to change. Quarterbacks in particular, Clint, Ty, there are two challenges to me for a quarterback to really prove that you're great. And by great, I mean, I'm talking about the guys on Sunday, the guys that are the best at it in the world. Two ultimate tests. The team's in a ditch and you got to drive them out of the ditch and get back on the road. Test number one. Test number two is a 2-minute offense. drive down the field. You got one timeout and 65 yards and 1:05 on the clock. Those two things are what makes the Sunday quarterbacks, the $100 million contract quarterbacks. Those two things. It's not an insult to say a college quarterback can't do those things or has yet to prove he can do those things, because they're the ultimate test. But those two things are probably going to be on Ty's plate Saturday. It only makes sense that at some point, whether you're up or down, Georgia's going to push the offense into a ditch. Ty, you got to drive the team out of it. And secondly, you're probably going to need a 2-minute score in this game, whether it's the end of the first half, the end of the second half. You probably are going to need that 2-minute thing. Do you have that in the bag? And again, these are huge litmus tests to determine whether your quarterback is good. I think we all know by now, Ty's pretty good. But is he great? You got to pass those tests before you're great.
I think one of two things has to happen. I think that the defense needs to have a massive day, or I think Ty Simpson has to have a massive day. Now, that might seem obvious because it's like, okay, if the defense didn't have a big day, that means Georgia's offense is probably going to have some success, which means you got to have an offense that can keep up with that. And if you got to go into that kind of high scoring, that's going to fall on Ty Simpson, especially when you can't trust the run game. But when you look at like Georgia last year, especially, like they play at Alabama in the fourth game, and Jalen Milroe, mobile quarterback, put strain on you with his legs. Defense for Alabama played good in the first half, but it didn't in the second half. So it ended up by the end of the game being a shootout, quick back and forth there at the end to make things interesting. But Alabama won that game. Georgia lost that game. You look at like Ole Miss. Ole Miss played really good defense against Georgia last year. They won 28-10. But not only that, you had the formula of having really good defense and limiting what Georgia did offensively. But then you also had a quarterback in Jackson Dart who not only had some success through the year, nothing crazy. I want to say he went sub 200 yards, but he also added some volume on the ground. I want to say he had 50 or 60-yard rushing. And if you do like the true rushing statistics and take sacks out, it's even bigger than that. But that's another one where Georgia, not only did they lose, they got slapped around pretty good against Ole Miss. That's one. You look at like Georgia Tech in the 4 overtime game. Granted, defensively, Georgia Tech didn't do nothing, but Haynes King stepped up and he threw for 300-plus yards. He rushed for over 100 yards. He had like 5 total touchdowns in that game. So once again, mobile quarterback, put strain on Georgia defensively with his legs, but then also to compensate for the fact that his defense wasn't that complementary piece, he said, I'll make my arm the complementary piece, and we'll bring that element. You look at, the fact that Notre Dame ended up beating Georgia. Riley Leonard did not have a lot of success through the air. He had less than 100 passing yards, if I recall correctly, but I also know he was a volume runner. He went for 80 to 85 yards. Now, it was a 23-10 final. So it's not like Notre Dame did anything crazy offensively, but once again, mobile quarterback who could put strain on Georgia defensively enough to get some points, and then the defense came out and had a good day against Georgia's offense, limit what they were able to do. Gunnar Stockton, first career start, and Notre Dame was pretty daggum good defensively, so that's understandable. My point, though, in saying all that is to say Alabama's got to have a good day defensively, or Ty Simpson's got to have a great day offensively if they want to have a chance. Now, if they can do both, then you really, and when I say great day, maybe it can become like, oh, Ty Simpson has a good day, defense has a good day, but it's enough to help get you a win. But that's something that, like, Georgia kind of has struggled against that mobility as well, and that's something to keep in mind because I think Ty Simpson's legs are going to be pretty big in this football game, a lot bigger. Everybody knows he's got the ability to run. I just think in this type of game, dealing with the crowd, maybe you're not seeing the pictures as well. There's a lot more anxiety and pressure. Ty Simpson will probably turn to his legs more than he did against Louisiana Monroe or against Wisconsin. So that is going to be a big element that fans need to be keeping their eye on.
Yeah, just Ty being decisive. Be decisive, because I can foresee Ty's real big plays with his legs, not necessarily being a quarterback draw or quarterback sweep, but it's 3rd and 8, and he went back there to throw the ball to Ryan, and Ryan's double covered, and he takes a quick glance at Germ, and he doesn't like that, and you run, go, run. Decide to run too quickly. I'm fine with against a defense like Georgia, as opposed to wait. If you wait and wait and wait, they're just going to get you back there in the backfield, and it's a disaster play. But Ty being decisive, calm and poised, and making good decisions on the fly. Again, we just said in-game adjustments on the sidelines. That happens on the sidelines. You don't wait till halftime. Be decisive on the field too. Make the right decision on the field while the bullets are flying, and I think he can have some success. That type quarterback, Clint, they're the hardest quarterbacks to defend in college football, are quarterbacks that can hurt you with their arm or their legs. They're the hardest guys to defend, but only if they're making the right decision at the right time. When do I run? When do I throw it? If Ty and Grubb are sort of, in sync, I like Alabama's chances to score well. As a matter of fact, I think Alabama will score in the 30s in this game. I think low 30s you might lose, high 30s you're likely to win.
All right, final thing we're going to talk about. Who do you like as your offensive player of the game for Alabama? The guy that you think is going to be maybe it's the X factor if you want to take it that route, maybe the surprise player. Who are you going to go with on offense for Alabama?
For Alabama to win the game, I think it needs to be Ty Simpson. I think it needs to be Ty. If Alabama wins, it's Ty. If Alabama loses, maybe it's a receiver that made some special jaw-dropping plays, like let's just go with Jeremy Bernard, because he made some jaw-dropping fun plays that might have helped put him in the first round. But Jeremy Bernard is not going to have 12 catches for 260 yards and Alabama wins. I think for Alabama to win, it's Ty, and it's Ty spreading the ball around, making the offense very difficult to defend because he got everybody involved.
For me, because I think Ty Simpson is the most important player easily for Alabama in this football game, especially on offense. But since you went with Ty Simpson, I'm going to go with a sneaky play for a number of reasons, and that is Isaiah Horton. I think a lot of the attention is going to be going to Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard. When you look at Chris Brazzell and the success that he had against Georgia, 6'5", 200 pounds, I think he played like one or two snaps in the slot. He is a pure perimeter receiver who brings that size and length, but he's a much better route runner than given credit for, given that size and length. I think Isaiah Horton, in some ways, provides a lot of that. I think the fact that you have had the bye week for Horton to continue to get healthy, and he hadn't really been given a chance. Like, he started to flash against Wisconsin. He started to show some of it, and you know that he can be a part of this offense. His ability to win downfield, provide some explosive plays, I think he can end up being a surprise impact player for Alabama relative to the rest of the guys, where you say, none of us said that this guy was Jameson Williams coming into the season, but we just thought from an explosive play standpoint, what he was doing in practice and in scrimmages, that hasn't really shown up yet. And I think that this would be a great game to get him involved as that third receiver, because when you talk about that other guy who's competing for that third receiver spot in Lassier Brooks, that's a true freshman. Are you asking him to go into Athens and really play at an extremely high level? I'm not saying that he won't. I'm saying that being the expectation going in probably is unfair, might not happen. Like, does he have the coaching staff's trust to the point where they will ask him to do that? Maybe they do. But I could see them also saying, hey, we got this guy who is a multi-year player who's played in a lot of big games, whether it be for Miami or obviously, in that Florida State game for Alabama. And Isaiah Horton, he's got Ty Simpson's trust. And, I could end up seeing Isaiah Horton having a massive, massive game on Saturday. We'll have to obviously wait and see, but that would probably be a sneaky play for me. But I agree with you, Jimmy, that I think Ty Simpson is the most important player. Do you have anything else before we hop out of here, brother?
Just one last thing that you mentioned, Isaiah Horton. Kind of funny, Georgia's wide receiver core looking like Alabama's in one way. Zachariah Branch, sort of a similar player to Ryan Williams, similarly sized, similar big playability. They're both guys that can take the screen, and then 80 yards later, they're in the end zone. And Colby Young at Georgia and Isaiah Horton are also extremely similar guys, but both 6'3", 215-ish. They're just big, tall, both from Miami, or played in Miami weirdly, but Colby Young and Isaiah Horton are just really similar dudes. It doesn't mean anything, but it's just kind of like Ryan and Zachariah and Colby, sort of similar duos. I'll tell you, mirror image. It's a big theme for me this week. There's a lot of similarities here.
You've got to. the secondary has to play well because Georgia this isn't some of the Georgia teams in recent years where they don't have some dudes, some weapons. I still think they're figuring out exactly how to use all of those guys, but they got more team speed at the wide receiver position. Like Noah Thomas has not been the player as involved in this offense as I probably thought he was going to. Does that change here? I don't know, because I think Alabama matches up with the length and size pretty well, but I could see Georgia leaning into the athleticism there with Zachariah Branch, maybe some of those guys. And when you look at some of the success that some of these offenses have had against Alabama, it's getting the wide receivers involved on the jets and things like that on run plays. Alabama has been pretty susceptible to that. So wouldn't be shocked at all if you ended up seeing Georgia hadn't had a lot of success with that so far. I also haven't seen it a ton. I could see them trying to kind of throw that out there against Alabama's defense. I know we are already previewing the other side here, but this was a great conversation, Jimmy. I appreciate you hopping on here with me. I appreciate everybody who listened in, and we will, Jimmy and I will both be back talking to you guys on Wednesday.
I may not suit up on Saturdays anymore, but I'm still in the game.
Let's roll.
In here, I call the plays, make adjustments, and lay it on the line. Want to feel that fire, that rush? Then you've got to get in the game. I used to say it in the tunnel, and I still say it now. Let's roll.